Welcome to the St. Joseph Radio Presents live program, broadcasting to you from the Rome of the West, St. Louis, Missouri. The program that for over 30 years has brought you eloquent speakers from across the globe to help explain, clarify, and evangelize the Catholic faith. Our program covers a variety of topics relating to current issues and occurrences in our daily lives. Now, with the aid of technology, we are able to bring the gospel message to the four corners of the world, where Christ himself did say, "Those who have ears ought to hear." It is our hope at St. Joseph Radio that through these programs we can help evangelize the world and change one soul at a time. Now, here is your host to introduce today's guest and topic.
Hello and welcome. This is St. Joseph Radio, and the program is Man to Man, featuring my co-host, Mike Hayworth, and my name is Mark Serafino, and we are coming to you from St. Louis, Missouri. We have a great topic to discuss today. It's an exciting topic. It's about adversity. So we're going to spend an hour exploring the various types of adversity that men and women can face in their lives and discuss some possible alternatives to a negative reaction to adversity and how we can take adversity and turn it into the positive. But before we get started, let's ask our co-host Mike if he could start us with a prayer.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. Dear God, give me courage, for perhaps I lack it more than anything else. I need courage before men against their threats and against their seductions. I need courage to bear unkindness, mockery, and contradiction. I need courage to fight against the devil, against terrors and troubles, temptations, attractions, darkness, and false lights, against tears, depression, and above all, fear. I need your help, dear God. Strengthen me with your love and your grace. Console me with your blessed presence, and grant me the courage to persevere until I am with you forever in heaven. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen.
Thank you. That is a powerful prayer.
Beautiful prayer.
And one that, from man to man, could easily be said as a daily prayer for manhood, for a dad, for the head of the family, to help him through. Because there are certainly fears that require courage, and adversity is one of them.
Yes.
And there's all different types of adversity that we will be delving into. Some of them are unavoidable consequences of events, and some of them are self-inflicted. And I think we're going to touch on a little of both. But before we get started diving into the topic, we just wanted to talk about a quote by Pope St. John Paul II, because I think you'll see as the program evolves that his words will ring through each of these topics. Freedom does not consist in doing what we please, but in having the right to do what must be done. So again, that's Pope St. John Paul II. And in adversity, doing what must be done is, within that lies the freedom that the Holy Father tells us about. But at the same time, because of the nature of adversity, a number of other attributes come into play, most notably fear and emotion. So it's gripping, and there's not really a simple solution to how do I overcome adversity. But there's some things that we could talk about that maybe are not as necessary. So first, let's talk about the types of adversity we're going to talk about today. Time management, work problems, home management, illness, and addiction. So the law was given that grace might be sought. Grace was given that the law might be fulfilled. Those words by St. Augustine. And it seems to me that the very first of the adversities we're going to talk about is directly tied to St. Augustine's thoughts, and that is time management. The inability to get to places or do things on time, whether it's events or work. And, Michael, I'm sure you have thoughts and experiences with this.
Right. So being from the military point of view, if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. That had guided me. And I have one story that it really was a blessing to me because it happened to me early in my career. I had 5 days at work that I came in late. And I had 2 supervisors from the Vietnam era. They were older gentlemen, well-seasoned, who had a different approach for whatever reason, and I'm always blessed by this, or I think this is a blessing. They took an approach of caring, and instead of saying this individual is not worth saving, this individual is not worth keeping, because it was well within their rights to say, you can't get here on time, we don't need you. This isn't all volunteer force, so we have others that can replace you. But in this instance, they said, we have a detail for you.
Oh, boy.
So they sent me on this thing called Falcon Fun Day. I'll never forget it. I had to go out with kids, and you have to understand, I'm between 17 and 18 years old, and my weekends are precious. But this particular weekend, I had to work with kids, and I was out there, and I wanted my time. So I do this Falcon Fun Day, and realize, this is horrible. I'm dealing with kids who, they're just unruly,
kids
doing all these different things. Well, after that event, I'm like, okay, that was horrible. I've gotten through it. Some time went by. Number one, I was incentivized to show up on the work on time, and it did change my attitude towards things. I started doing things well, and I started realizing a little bit of gratitude already. However, some time went by, and I was put in for an award, and part of that award package was that I served with this Falcon Fun Day. I don't know if people can understand it, but from a military point of view, these 2 guys changed me in such an interesting way, because they said, if you could do this one thing, if you can make this one sacrifice and realize that you can do things a little bit differently, show up on time, it impressed me so much that, that was a thing that kind of stuck with me. I ended up getting Airman of the Year.
Wow.
On all these awards, and it was because they took an approach to correct my behavior. And I know it's the point of it is time. They took the time to help me, and because of my inept ability to manage my time, they did shape so much for me. It really, and if they were, I don't know if they're alive today, but if they could hear that, just how thankful I am that they did that for me.
Well, it sounds like they made you think more seriously beyond just that weekend.
Right. Because the impression they made on me was that, and it was kind of reinforced. They took the time to reinforce that, because things that I was doing in the military, I had to be at an aircraft at a specific time with the ordnance that they needed to fly with. Everything that I did had time tied to it.
Wow.
So sorties had to leave on time. Aircraft had to be recovered at a certain time and then regenerated again in a certain amount of time. So time was a thing that I didn't really take value in until that happened. So then, all the way up to things that happened for 9/11, time was a factor in all of that. And so the importance of time management, is such a small thing, but if you care, and that's one of the things that I want to impress on anybody that has challenges with time, if it's something you care about, you tend to make time for it.
Yes, that's so true.
So treat all those things. I'm not saying you have to go into crisis management all the time, but you do need to be able to understand that it takes you an amount of time to get from point A to point B, and then factor in some fudge so that you can say, okay,
No question about it.
there shouldn't be a reason why you can't show up on time.
Well, it's funny. I have 2 work time management stories, and one of them was one of the owners of the company I worked for had told me that at an earlier stage in his career, he was born and raised in Philadelphia. He took a job in Syracuse, New York. And if you know anything about Syracuse, New York, they're famous for snow. So he's up there for his first winter, and the first time that there is a Syracuse snowfall, when his alarm goes off, he rolls over, turns it off, and says, well, there won't be any need. I can sleep another hour because the roads will be filled with snow and it'll be impassable. And then I'll just wait an hour and go to work. So that's exactly what he did. And when he told me the story, it was so funny because he said the moment he pulled into the parking lot, he knew he was in trouble because it was full. Every employee's car was there. And when he was walking into the building, he recognized using the excuse that there was snow on the ground simply wasn't going to work. So he walked in, and sure enough, his boss just said to him very casually, "Did you have a problem this morning?" And he said, "Yes, but it won't happen again." Because he recognized that it was presumptuous of him to just assume, well, it snowed and everybody's going to stay home. And I'll tell you another one is that while I didn't serve in the military, I worked for a company that if you weren't 15 minutes early, you were late. And we were one time in Puerto Rico for a company meeting, a very big company meeting. We had invited our best salespeople and our best management people to come, and this was partially for fun, for enjoyment, but every day we would meet for 5 hours before anything else could happen. And the meetings started at 7:30. Those of us who had been there for a while, and even if you hadn't, you kind of knew get there between 7 and 7:15. Well, the first morning that we met, one of our employees from up in the Northeast came walking into the room at around 8:30. And our CEO said to him, "Did you have a problem?" And he said, "Well, I was out last night with some of the guys, and then we went here, we went to a casino." And our CEO just very, very casually shook his head and said, "Oh, thank you." And he looked at that man's supervisor, and those of us in the room who knew that that look meant this man no longer works for us. And as soon as we get back to the States, he's gone. And that is exactly what happened. So it can be extreme. It could be one time, but the presumption of time, and here's what I think too about that, is that if I'm habitually late, what I'm saying is I don't respect you.
That is so true. And okay, so I won't even take it to our mass, right?
Yes.
Walking in at 2 minutes till is not the right thing to do.
Is late.
Now, I don't want to, things happen.
Sure.
Understood. But if it is habitually that way, you have a problem.
Yes.
And I don't want to preach about those kind of things. It's just that realize what you're doing is that what do you care about?
Right.
What do you care about? And if you, in our Mass is our chance to be with our Lord, show up.
Yeah.
On time.
Be present.
Be present.
Yes. Yes.
So that's...
So it's funny because time management, the examples we've given are work-related. And that flows very nicely into our next topic, which is work problems. And so often, an inability to be on time is symptomatic of something else within an employee. And typically what you see, what I have done, is we complain. This company doesn't know what they're doing. My boss he's a fool. He doesn't know how to be a boss. He doesn't know how to run this department. My coworkers, I'd be great if it wasn't for my coworkers. And these are things that they become really terrible habits that there's adversity involved, because more often than not, there's an underlying cause that would require some courage, personal courage, to analyze what is it that's making me act this way. And it's easier to complain and let everybody know that you're unhappy than it is to do a self-reflection on why am I feeling this way. And I'll tell you a personal story. I went through a period of time in my work. I worked for the same company for 33 years, but I went through a period of time where I felt that the person who was managing me, that I was reporting to, was just wasn't doing a good enough job. I felt that it was too casual and that there wasn't really any assistance as much as there was babysitting. And I had a coworker in another part of the country who felt the same way. And before I knew it, the two of us were on the phone to each other every day, 3 to 4 times a day, literally almost reporting by the minute, did you see that email? Can you believe he said this? And in that, my boss became the evil demon. The company, because I couldn't believe they had the nerve to keep as an employee somebody who was so ill-equipped to be in that role. And everyone around was inferior to my genius. And it was that way for quite a while. The reality was, and still is, I'm not a genius. And the reality was, I simply wasn't working hard. I was showing up, and I was allowing, and by the way, maybe he gave some less than stellar directives. But I came to realize when I accepted the job and the money that came with it, I accepted the responsibilities of the job, and I tacitly said I would follow along with those orders. I would listen to the orders, I would fulfill them. And somewhere along the line, I got disconnected from that. And it became everybody else's problem. I need to go find another job. I need to, this company, they should fire this person. And then one day, I just found myself, by the grace of God, I was so sick of hearing myself. My friend and I couldn't possibly find a new thing to discuss that I thought as I was driving into work, I'll never forget, I'm driving in that morning and said, you know what? Today, I'm just going to put my head down and do my job better than I've ever done it before. And I'm going to do that for all 8 hours. And then tomorrow, I'm going to try to do it again. And I'll continue to do that. And we're talking about a period of a couple of years of this kind of horrible attitude, and how many people I affected with my attitude. Mm-hmm. Not just my friend on the East Coast, but how many other people. So in that, I finally was able to overcome it by the grace of God. And believe it or not, within 8 months, I received a promotion. So adversity is really self-inflicted, yes, and something that is really pretty easy to overcome. So I do want to remind you all that you're listening to us on St. Joseph Radio. This is Man to Man. I'm Mark Serafino, and this is my good friend and co-host, Mike Hayworth. Mike, tell me, have you ever complained about a boss?
Absolutely, and the reason I wanted to chime in on this is I told this before, but for a period of time in the military, me and 2 of my really good friends commiserated, literally, just exactly what you're talking about. The difference for me on this story is I did it for 4 years, so it was a long time, and my wife asked me a very simple question. I somehow came back and said the same thing to her, and she says, you've complained about this for 4 years. What are you going to do different now? And I was blown away, and I didn't have an answer. Mm-hmm. I was like, okay. And because this is my wife, and she hit me with something I wasn't expecting, and I had to think about it. And the same thing is like you had to do something different.
Yes.
And then I started studying. I started doing things in a different way that was more productive. Mm-hmm. Actually getting results. I got promoted the first time after that. So my wife really helped me in just saying those words and challenged me. That's always been incredible for me, because how much different it can be if you're willing to step outside and say, I got to do something different. Because if people, that's the thing, a lot of our problems are our problems.
Yes.
And if we just take the moment and say, okay, let me look at this a little bit different and figure it out, because that's what we need to do. When people come to me with complaints, and I've had supervisors do the same, give me your complaint, but give me your solution too.
Yes.
Because that's a whole lot different approach than just saying, I don't like this, or this should be different. Okay, what do you want to do about it?
It's especially bad when you're in that disposition and you're the leader of other people. You poison your team. You poison them towards the company, towards yourself. And I shudder to think the negative impact that I had on people during those several years that I was really mired in this self-pity. And I can't even tell you why I felt that way. It just simply was.
Well, that's the other thing, too, is like we have there's another thing that I heard is like, we've been so successful in this country.
Yes.
That we complain about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets to, it shouldn't take a war. It shouldn't take awful things happening for us to say, we can do something different. Sometimes we just need to step up.
That's right.
And do what we need to do to figure out, okay, we can do something better, do those things. And it's in small steps.
Oh, absolutely. I'll say, too, that my heart goes out to my family during those years because I know that I wasn't the same person. And sometimes I look back and wonder if after the fact I ever was the person I had been before. I don't think you regain it. I think it changes a little bit in who you are. But that damage doesn't just erase. The damage of that negativity that you self-inflict on yourself.
Right.
It's a difficult thing. So I would encourage you that, listeners, if you're in a situation where you're feeling that way, that it's your boss, it's the company, it's the manager of this department, it's probably a good idea to take a pause and sit down, go to a coffee shop or sit down at home, go sit in front of the Blessed Sacrament.
Amen. Yes.
And really ask yourself, where do I fit in this? If I could hear what those people who I'm complaining about were saying about me, what would they be saying? Because they may be thinking some pretty bad things about me too and the way I'm conducting myself. Mm-hmm. So those things that we do have impact that goes far beyond that gossipy conversation with a coworker.
Right.
Illness is another adversity, and it's a big one.
Right.
There's personal illness, and of course, for the most part, illness is not self-inflicted. You can argue if someone is a smoker or,
life happens.
Right. Those things happen. But illness is maybe one of the biggest things for an individual to overcome, one of the biggest adversities. I mean, the most beautiful stories in the world are the stories about a family who rallies around a family member who has an affliction of some sort. And, very often we hear about those in the latter part of an individual's life. People rally around mom or grandma or granddad. And that's, it's very real. It's going on right as we're speaking at this moment. But there's also other adversities in the family where a child may be afflicted, and that's especially painful. And how we handle that adversity sets an example that those around us, and again, our children and our family, they're watching, and they want to see how we're going to handle that kind of adversity. And in the family, a mother is always going to lead with her heart, and if one of her children, God forbid, has any kind of affliction, she's going to be very, very protective of that child.
Mm-hmm.
Dad has a double job there. Dad has to really be with and in support of mom. And talk about being third.
Right.
That's the moment for dad to be third. When you have a child who's afflicted, even though as a dad, your heart is aching, your heart is breaking, you still come behind God, your wife, and that child.
Right.
And I think, and I have seen, and I think we've all seen situations where dads just don't really know where to be in such a situation. And I will tell you a story about one such situation with a young man that we knew out in the Rocky Mountain areas who, at 5 years old, was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy. And he was one of 6 brothers. And his mom and dad really could be, they could be the example to build on for how you handle adversity. They were not necessarily overly poor individuals, but they at the same time were not extremely wealthy. So they were what you would just call regular people. And their son at 5, when he was diagnosed, I think they told him that he maybe would have 5 more years. That young man died at the age of 35.
Oh, my.
So imagine caring for someone. First imagine the shock. This is what your son has. It's uncurable. He's probably got 5 years. And you're living those 5 years. How? What are we going to do? How do we help this person?
Right.
And then they live to 35 years old.
Because you don't know how it's going to work out.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. And I knew this person very well. He's a relative of my wife's. And I'll just share with you, at one point we were in camping. And we were out in the mountains, in the Beartooth Mountains in Montana. And we were going to set up our tents. And the spot where we parked the vehicles looked like a perfectly fine place to me. But the family members had a different idea. They thought to cross this little tiny creek would be a little bit better because the fishing might be better on that side of the creek. And little tiny, it was probably about 10 feet wide. And we had to get a 200-pound boy in a 200-pound wheelchair across oak planks. And what really struck me was that Dad came prepared. This wasn't a surprise. Dad had already gone, scouted out the area, so he knew that this was something that they were going to have to confront. Now, I will tell you the rest of the story after this break, and I promise you, it's worth hearing. You're listening to Man on St. Joseph Radio. We'll be back.
Hi, this is Matt Loggeman with St. Joseph Radio with a great gift idea. A St. Benedict bracelet, a trendy accessory for men, women, and children that not only looks good on everyone's wrist, but is actually armor for the spiritual battlefield. This unique bracelet is handmade in Europe and contains 10 medals within the braided cord in the adult size and 7 medals in the children's size. On the front of each beautiful medal is St. Benedict holding a cross in his right hand, the object of his devotion. On the back of each medal is a cross. Surrounding the back of the medal and cross are the letters VRSN MVSMQLIVB, in Latin reference which translates, "Begone, Satan. Never tempt me with your vanities. What you offer me is evil. Drink the poison yourself." And finally, located at the top is the word Pax, which means peace. All bracelets come packaged with an informational card and a St. Benedict blessing which your local priest can administer. This gift is for everyone you love and care about, including yourself. Available from St. Joseph Radio. Check the website at www.saintjosephradio.net.
St. Joseph Catholic Radio is proud to announce the launch of SJEN TV, the St. Joseph Evangelization Network. SJEN TV is a premier online Catholic broadcasting network providing quality Catholic programming 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have programming such as live studio interviews, St. Joe's Java speaker presentations, current Catholic issues, and the Pro-Life series. We're featuring the many talented speakers out of Orange County, California, and this Archdiocese of St. Louis, Missouri, including Professor John Gresham, Father James Mason, Karen Nokemper, Rick Hollerick, Bill Federer, and many more. To review the program list, go to sjen.tv or on Roku, SJEN TV. All this programming is free, and we are welcoming sponsorship of new programs. Find out more at sjen.tv.
Welcome back. You're listening to Man to Man. This is Mark Serafino, and my co-host is Mike Hayworth. So, before the break, we were talking about adversity, and specifically in the case of a man I knew out in the Rocky Mountain region. And I was telling you that we were about to traverse about a 10-foot wide gap from one piece of land to another over a small creek. And we had to, or the plan was to move a wheelchair with a young man, in total probably about 400 pounds, and get it across these oak planks to the ideal camping and fishing spot. So as I stood by and watched, because I was actually a newcomer, this was my first time on this trip, the young man's father said to me, hey, Mark, stand in the creek on this side of the planks. And he got another young man, he said, you stand on the other side, and we're going to just wheel across the creek and just make sure the wheelchair doesn't fall off. We're talking 400 pounds. So first of all, he had a lot of confidence in me. And I took that seriously because I knew that he did, that he asked me that. It was a great responsibility. So across the way we go, and when we get to the other side, well, this isn't a paved project. So the planks ended with about a 3 to 4 inch rise before you could actually get back on land. And the wheelchair wasn't equipped to go up that high. So what happened was the dad said, all right, you two guys stand on each side, and when I say 3, we lift it up. Okay. So we stood there, and I was looking at the man on the other side of me, and we both had a look of, oh boy, I hope we can do this. And the father said 1, 2, and before he said 3, he lifted the chair up and put it on the other side of the bank. And the young man that was with me, to this moment, we have no doubt that was love that lifted that chair. It was a deep love that was born over years of caring for this afflicted child.
Wow.
And in that case, what I just saw in that moment was, this is how a man deals with adversity. He dives into it.
Yes.
And he won't let anything stand in his way. And as marvelous and as unbelievably impressive as the dad was, the son was even more so. I got to be around him, over the course of 4 or 5 years, I got to be around him on many occasions. Never did I ever hear him complain about his affliction. Never. He was always very, very animated, happy to see you. He loved kids. Kids loved him. He was an attraction to them. He would give them rides on his wheelchair. He would always make it a point to connect with young people. He connected with young and old. Everyone who knew him loved him. And as his life went on, he reached a point where he could only move his wheelchair by blowing into a straw. They had a specially crafted wheelchair. And even with that, we still went camping in the Beartooth Mountains. Unbelievable, almost indescribable unless you saw it. And until his dying day, never once questioned why, just accepted and lived through and embraced the adversity.
That is such a great story, because that's the thing that amazes me is anybody that has to deal with those kind of things are more of an example to us.
Absolutely.
Than they are. You're looking at them going, oh gosh, how do you, when they're like, I'm doing my piece. and they just absolutely inspire.
Yes.
Because it's, oh gosh, when I have capability and turn around and complain about something, I should be ashamed. I mean, there's many times where I'm just like, I should be absolutely ashamed because others are dealing with real adversity.
Yes.
And that's what, I just see others like you have where you're like, okay, what I'm dealing with is not that bad, and I should do better.
A tremendous inspiration to people around them. And what we have to do is we have to be present, and we have to watch and learn and be willing to not turn away and say, that's not my issue, or, luckily that it's not about luck. It's not about your issue. People like that, with that kind of determination and perseverance through any kind of adversity, they are the role models and heroes that we should be adhering to in everything that we do in our lives. It was just an indescribable time to to have gotten to be around that young man. But, I thought about something on the break beyond illness, and it was something we skipped over when we were talking about home management, and that was the adversity embedded in home finance. And
there's always a challenge of dollars and needs.
There always is. There was a time that my wife revealed to me at a certain time that when Dad would go to pay the bills, Mom and the children would clear out. No one would come into that room while I was in there paying the bills. Now, I don't know that it wasn't like I was throwing things, but it was simply the tension of trying to decide, what am I supposed to do? How did this happen?
Right.
And that is one of the leading causes of divorce. I mean, managing money and a family is hugely important, and having the ability to overcome and to work through that adversity is really critically important.
One of the things that when we first started out, there was always never enough, right? We felt like you're starting out, and not every family has to deal with that, but I kind of felt like that was one of the things that we had challenge with. But the one thing I was very thankful for is that at some point, it's going to get better. And if you just take that mindset and say, okay, it's this way today, but it's not going to, and pain, I always think of SEAL teams. Pain is at a threshold, and sometimes you push beyond it. And it amazes me what people can do. And in the finance side of the house, I mean, it's so ingrained that, we're supposed to provide for the family, but there's going to be challenges. Always. And when those challenges come, and 2008 was rough. It was rough.
Yes.
But in those challenges, I look back and go, I'm so thankful that I went through that. It was hard, yes. But there's a part of it that no matter what, it could be finance or whatever, going through those hard times, the other side, you look back and go, wow, okay. And if you go through it with the determination that you're going to get through it, you depend on God, but you have your part, and you do whatever it is you're supposed to. I remember interviewing some interesting places, and but in the end, I look back on it and I'm so thankful, because you don't know what your life can turn. Just things here in America can turn quickly and fast. But hang on. As I like to say, as men, hang on and work through whatever that is.
Michael, you mentioned God in the equation for finances, and I'll tell you this story that, as the money manager of the house, the person who pays the bills, and having everyone hide when you took out the checkbook, that's not necessarily a great equation for success. No one was calling me and asking me what was my winning formula, and I didn't have one. And one time, and again, God has been. I tell people this all the time. God has been ridiculously generous to me. I don't deserve it. Just a fact. It's not even humility. It's just a fact. Know me, and you'll know that. In one of those moments, as I was sitting trying to figure out how are we going to pay these bills, have food on the table, and just a bare minimum of spending money for the next 2 weeks, I heard a voice inside of my head that said, has it occurred to you that you are incapable of handling family finances? At this point, Mark, look at what you've been doing for the past couple of years. We were making it, but always by the skin of our teeth. We were one heating failure away from disaster. And as I sat there and thought about that, I looked up, and in our kitchen, we have an image of Our Lady of Good Counsel. And I've always had a particular fondness and love for Our Lady of Good Counsel. And it hit me. Good counsel. And right at that moment, I took on the piece of paper that I had in front of me with all of the facts and figures. And at the very top, which I should have been doing all along, but again, look how well I had been doing with my management, I wrote at the very top of the page, JMJ, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. And I looked at the image, and I said a prayer, and at the end of the prayer, I simply said, I asked Our Lady to please take over and tell me what I should do, in what order I should do it, and then I would follow that. And I stopped trying to be my own version of a multimillionaire, which I wasn't, nor was I ever going to be. The moment I did that moment, as I went through the bills that day, nothing had changed. It wasn't like a flood of money came into our account. But what was absent was the anxiety and stress. Because I was realizing, okay, I have a partner. She's been there all along. But I finally asked her for my help, for her help. And with her, we're going to get through this. So it became my practice anytime I sat down to pay bills to invoke Our Lady of Good Counsel's help. This many years later, I still do. Every time I take out the checkbook. In fact, sitting next to my desk is an image of her sitting right there with me. I look at her and Our Lady of Guadalupe every time I sit down at my desk. But from the time I did that, I went from, okay, so I've got these envelopes with checks in them, but I can't mail them yet because I'm not sure they'll clear until next Tuesday, but at least I have the checks written. I went from that to everything just washed away, and there was no longer any more having to wait. It simply fell into place. And I want to tell you, it wasn't because I had gotten an enormous raise at work. It was, life was still the same. But now I had the ultimate counselor guiding me and directing me, because I didn't then, and I don't now, really understand how to manage the finances of a family. So if I would say to you, if you at home have in any way that same experience, reach out to Our Lady of Good Counsel, or a saint or version of Our Lady that you feel most akin to. But Our Lady of Good Counsel, just by her name, is a great advisor for how to handle your finances.
I just find that it's one of those things, the more you read, the more you find out about these hopeful saints and our Blessed Mother's capability, and we don't ask enough.
Yeah.
Once we surrender that peace and say, I can't do this, the help comes, but you have to surrender. Because I think our minds are so wrapped up in, I'll do this, that we can't think clearly.
You know, Mike, at the time I was doing that, I was managing a business that at that point was maybe $30 million. Why would I need somebody's help? I'm managing a business. But it wasn't my business. I was operating and overseeing for somebody else their money. And, you know, certainly I got paid for that.
Right.
But the ego in me was thinking, well, you manage a $30 million business. Why can't you manage, you know, these family finances? And submitting is exactly the point.
Wow.
So I highly encourage that. But I'd like to switch courses now and talk about maybe one of the most horrible of all of the adversities that men and women face, and that is the adversity of addiction. It comes in all forms: alcohol, drugs, porn, and it doesn't even have to be that extreme.
Right.
Gambling, another addiction.
They're all, it's all something that takes over.
Yes.
And that's the thing, is like everybody has a hook. I don't care what it is.
Yes.
Everybody has a hook. And when that hook gets into you and you don't try to challenge it or do something about it, you know, it ruins your life, and it takes you down a path. I've witnessed, I've seen those where you get to a point and you look up. I always remember this from a movie where, how did I get this far from shore? You went out so far, I can't get back, or you think you can't get back.
Right.
And that's when you start praying. Well, that's a little too late.
Yes.
So the main thing is to realize everybody has a hook of some sort. Yes. So don't get hung up on that.
Right.
The other side is that once you do realize that something is kind of taking you down a road that you're like, oh, this is harmless, or it's not. It's all about management. You've got to be able to manage your time, manage the things that are important, because something small, something that is not that important, that all of a sudden is dominating your life, can run you into a spiral.
And you talk about something small. I know of a story of a man who had a habit of having a donut every morning with coffee for breakfast.
Yeah.
And he had done it for years, and that was his thing. And one day he had this thought that maybe that donut had more control of him than he had of the donut. So he decided, tomorrow, no donut. And when the time came, next morning, he was committed, no donut. But the donut was talking to him, and it kept calling at him. And he succumbed and ate the donut. Now, we'll talk more about that in a moment, but first I want to tell you that you're listening to St. Joseph Radio, coming to you from St. Louis, Missouri. This is Man to Man, and I'm Mark Serafino, and this is my co-host, Mike Hayworth. So, Mike, have you ever known anybody who had a donut talk to them?
No, but I can understand it, I think.
Well, I think there's things that talk to me today, right now. There's certain things that, you walk by and you say, I don't know that I could say no. Red licorice is one for me. Yeah. That if I'm not careful, I can convince myself that I have to eat this piece of licorice. And that's an addiction. So, many books and movies and television shows are written about drugs and porn, and they are horrible. They're the hardest of the addictions. But the ones that are every day, they're the ones that break us down to even drive us closer to those big ones.
Right. Well, and one of the things I remember, I heard on a podcast, I want to say it was Father Schmidt, but it might have been somebody else. But anyway, our attraction to pleasure is a driver, and that's one of the things. And here, I compare things to where I've been. I've been to Korea, I've been to Saudi Arabia, I've been to Germany, I've been to these places, and none of those are horrible, but it's not America. And here we have so much. So I definitely understand the ease of letting something small get a hold of you. But my point is that once you recognize that, once those things are starting to dominate your thought, you have to realize, okay, there's something here. Recognize it earlier is better.
Yes.
But if it's gotten you down a road that's, you're starting to see it's getting away from you, take the time to challenge yourself. And sometimes, just what that gentleman did for himself about the donut, I mean, if you find yourself saying, I'm not going to do something, and you end up doing it, you got a problem.
Yes, you do.
And just admit it.
That's right. But just like finances, don't do it alone.
Boy, that's the truth.
Bring our Lord, His Mother, and the saints on the journey with you. They want to do this with you. They want to be with you. There's a tremendous story, and I think someday we could probably do an entire show on this, but there's a former Marine, Colonel John Ripley, and he was in the Vietnam War, and the story about him on Easter blowing up a bridge in Dong Ha, Vietnam. And the story is spectacular because if you read his the exploits of what he did, they were superhuman. He traversed hand over hand, hanging, I think it was about 40 feet in the air on the bottom of a bridge with the North Vietnamese army shooting at him. And pretty much the entire army was coming to go over that bridge into South Vietnam. And his orders were to stop that army. And he personally swung hand over hand under the bridge, packing explosives in the bottom of the bridge. Now, as you can imagine, the bad guys weren't real excited about him completing that mission successfully. So imagine the amount of gunfire that was being directed towards him. What he was carrying was heavy, physically heavy. He didn't have the proper tools to get the job done. But he knew that it absolutely had to be done. And as he was doing it, this devout Catholic man started to pray. And with each prayer, or with each rung, as he clung to the bottom of the bridge, he said this prayer: Jesus, Mary, get me there. And he repeated that prayer
Every rung.
over and over, every rung. And over an inordinately long time, again, with horrible incoming fire, he was able to successfully blow up the bridge and was pretty much credited with really keeping the North Vietnamese army from just sweeping down and taking over that part of Vietnam. So he had an insurmountable task. You might say that he was facing adversity.
Yes.
And he did it with persistence, patience, and prayer. And that seems like the formula for how we overcome adversity. So, interesting thing about that prayer is when I had heard the story, I saw him speak and tell his story, and it was very, very moving and very inspirational. Not too long after that, I was about a year or two later, I was at a protest, and it was we were protesting a blasphemy at a college in Kansas. I won't even tell you what the blasphemy was, because the fact that it was blasphemy should tell you enough. And there were maybe 24 of us, and we were praying the rosary out in front. We had signs telling the public why we were protesting, and a group of counter-protesters came. And they stood across the street from us, and they were rather infamous. Won't give them any news here, but they were infamous, especially in the 2000s, protesting military. So they were across the street, and they were much better organized than we were. They knew how to manipulate the press. And the fact that they were there was disappointing to us, because we felt like it would really water down our message. And one of my friends, who had also seen Colonel Ripley speak, looked at me, and we were praying the rosary, and we had finished, and he said, "Let's pray this. Jesus, Mary, make those people go away." And we started praying that, just he and I. Amazingly, in just about 5 minutes, for no reason, to this day we don't understand why, the people packed up their stuff and left. And these were people that had a virulent hatred towards our country, towards the Catholic Church. And this event that we were protesting was right up their alley for publicity and news. Mm-hmm. Yet by praying that prayer, they left. So when you hear prayers, when you hear stories about this saint said a prayer, or this is what, those are public domain. Feel free to borrow them and use them. I have actually found that saying prayers at those moments are the best remedy to overcoming adversity. Well, that's another episode of Man to Man. Adversity, great or small, prayer, patience, and perseverance is the formula to face it. Thank you for listening.
Listening to St. Joseph Radio Presents from the Rome of the West, St. Louis, Missouri. If you would like to join us in our evangelization efforts, you can order a copy of today's broadcast or any of our past programs by visiting us on our website, stjosephradio.net. That's SAINT, josephradio.net. Or call us 636-447-6000. It's all at your fingertips to help us evangelize the world, bringing the good news of Christ to everyone you meet and change one soul at a time. Thank you for your prayers and support. Until next time, may God bless you and your family. This has been a presentation of St. Joseph Radio Presents.